Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on time for the event that we'll be having today. I'm grateful for your patience and also for just being punctual for this session. So before we get started, I'd like to hear from some of you, just a short icebreaker to hear how you're doing this Friday and what are your expectations. So when I call on you, please say an introduction about yourself, your name, what you do, and what you're excited about for this session. So yes, I will start us off with, I'll start off with introducing myself and then I'll pick on someone else. So my name is Rose Delilah Gesicho and I'm the Zindi Community Coordinator. And my expectation for this session, I'm excited to hear from an expert about emerging technologies and just emerging trends in AI and data, and most especially that our speaker is from the UN. I'm looking forward to learn a lot because we know it's a big organization. So I will pick on Sherilyn to go next. Sherilyn Mafosa. I hope you can be able to unmute. Okay.
Yes. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you are. My name is Temba Sherilyn Maposa, and I am a data analyst based in Zimbabwe. What I'm most excited about for this session is for me to actually know what trends that I need to be knowing in my field so that I can be on board with those ones and be up to date with all the tools that I need to be using. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I can pick on Moan Lobago. Feel free to unmute. Yeah.
Hello, Moan Lobago from Kenya. I'm very glad to be here. I'm ready to hear from the expert to be able to learn more about AI. I'm open-minded and I'm ready to learn. Okay, that's what I
have. Thank you, Moan. Also looking forward to that. Who else can I nominate as our last person? Let me look at the list. Courtney, will you be able to unmute? Courtney? If not, let's hear from Gladys Mwangi. Okay, don't be shy. You never know who's here. You can even tell us you're looking for an opportunity. And you never know the internship and big people here who might give you opportunities. So feel free to unmute. Don't feel shy. I'll pick on the last person, Felix Olonde. Just tell us what you do and what are your expectations for this session. Okay, Felix also. Okay, hopefully we'll have an engaging session as you guys ask questions. Oh, Felix, I see you. Yes?
Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm fine, Felix. You can introduce yourself and tell us what are your expectations for this session.
My name is Felix Londe. I'm also delving in data science and AI. So I joined the session to, first of all, see the trends in data science spectrum, as well as AI.
Thank you, Felix, for sharing that. I think we can get started and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining in the session. And if your friends haven't joined in and they were curious about this topic we have today, please send them the link and tell them that we are live. Great. So I'll just share my screen a bit to take us through what we have in store for you today. Just give me a moment. Okay, great. So welcome everyone once more to this amazing session that we have prepared for you as Zindi, where we build AI together. So for those who haven't interacted with Zindi before, or you'd like to know more about Zindi, Zindi is a professional network for data science whose mission is to mobilize a vibrant community of data scientists across Africa, solving the region's most pressing problems. So that's what we stand for, and I hope everyone is excited about that mission. And some event highlights for today is we are going to have an amazing speaker, as I have mentioned. We have someone joining us from the UN, but we wanted to highlight some things we have done with the UN on the Zindi end, and you can be able to go on our platform and engage with those competitions. So we have run some multiple competitions such as Flood Prediction Challenge in Malawi, 2030 Vision Data Visualization and Reporting Challenge, Landslide Prevention and Innovation Challenge, and we will also be partnering with ITU to provide a competition this year on next gen Wi-Fi throughput prediction challenge. So as you can see, we have amazing things planned out, and we have already been working with the UN in providing some of the competitions we have hosted on Zindi. So feel free to go to our platform and engage with these competitions. I'm definitely sure that you're going to learn a lot. So some housekeeping is participate in the discussions, mute when you're not speaking to avoid the background noise, and use the chat section to drop questions and interact amongst each other. So please use the chat section. If you're curious about any question you have in mind, please put it on the chat. We'll flag it and our speaker will be able to answer to it. So don't sit there with the answers. This is a one-time opportunity. So please take it to ask questions. For this agenda for the event, we have an introduction and icebreaker, which we have already covered. Then you'll have a speaker discussion. So we'll have questions and have we'll get the discussion through questions where we'll have our speaker respond to them, and then we'll continue through the session. And in case you have any questions, we'll flag them, and that is how we are going to go through with the event. And please ensure that, again, on the chat, you're posting your questions so that we follow up after that. And then afterwards, we'll have the feedback, sharing the feedback form in case you have maybe context you want to give us more for events that are coming up, and also inviting everyone to join the ambassador program that we have for this spring. So that's the agenda we have for this event. And without further ado, I know most of us are really anxious and waiting to hear from the speaker. So I won't take that a long time to continue with the introduction. So I will just get started. We'll get started with the session, and I will stop sharing so that you can have a wide view of the speaker we have. Yes, and we'll do the Q&A now. So before we get started with all the question and answer, we are definitely curious who this is, who has joined us today. And I would like to invite you, Lamba. Thank you so much for joining us for this event. I know you have a busy schedule, but we are grateful for you coming through for this event. And first question would be giving us a background about yourself and just telling us what inspired you to join the AI field.
Sure. Thanks so much for inviting me. It's great to see so many people on the session here. So I hope I can contribute something useful for you. I've been in AI and data for a long time. I was always interested in automation, and I studied a bit of psychology as well. So trying to automate the brain or to simulate the brain with computers has always fascinated me. That's why I started artificial intelligence. But this, mind you, this was in the 90s, and AI, the field of AI was very, very different. We didn't have all the breakthroughs in technology that we've seen now. So it was, we built systems called expert systems with rules, and it was all very primitive. It didn't work very well. So, you know, it was there wasn't much you could practically do with it. So at some point I started doing other things, and I joined the UN at some point. My first 2 years with the UN were in Africa. I was based in Ethiopia, but I was traveling all throughout Africa to teach universities and ministries and other organizations that asked help from the UN to teach them about new technologies. At the time, it was CD-ROM and email were quite new. So and then data, I think that came from my interest in storytelling and art, and that led me to data visualization. And for a few years, I did a lot of work on data visualization, and then I started realizing that the data behind it is really key, and that a lot of organizations don't have their data organized very well. And I started becoming interested in that topic, the topic of data governance and data sharing and these things.
That's amazing to hear. And how many years, maybe you can approximate for us to know you have been in the industry?
I would say about in data and AI, about 25.
Wow. Okay, that's amazing. As you can see, guys, we have a really knowledgeable person with us. So if you have questions, please put them on the chat. For my second question would be, because for these 25 years you have been in data, what are these exciting developments in the field you have seen throughout these years? You started off saying we were using expert systems, and now we are advancing. So what are these developments that have been happening within?
Yeah, it's been the last 5-6 years has been amazing in AI. And you know, I think there's just two things that permeated that. The first, it was the availability of data. We have so many more ways to measure now. The Internet of Things, where you can measure a lot of devices, but also the ability to measure our processes. Of course, social networks have played a big role in that, where everybody in the world is participating in some kinds of social networks probably, and they collect clicks about whatever you do, and that becomes very valuable. People started taking note of that, and so we have so much data at the moment, which we didn't have before. The other is, of course, the technology. At some point, was it 2017, or there was this famous paper published by some people at Google. It was called "Attention is All You Need," and that introduced the concept of transformer models that are sort of very generic models that don't need millions and millions of examples to learn from, but that can sort of extrapolate, that can understand the dynamics of how things work, the system underneath, and replicate that and use it to do new things. So that kickstarted things as well. I think those are what is coming out of that recently are the large language models, LLMs.
I'm gonna drop right now.
Okay. The other thing that I think is very exciting is the enormous ecosystem of software libraries. Either the Python ecosystem, the PyTorch, and TensorFlow, and that ecosystem. And so there's a lot of tools available. And a lot of those are open source and free, so anybody can get started. So it really opens up the situation for a lot of new people to get into data science and get into AI. The tools are free, and a lot of the education is also free. You can find really good courses online that will help you get started.
Well, that's really nice, and thank you for pushing us. You have also recommended us to maybe read about the attention. You said attention, that paper.
Attention is all you need. It's the title of an academic paper that they were the first to describe how you could use transformer models in AI.
Okay, great, thank you. So please note that down and maybe go and read more about that, the transformer models. Maybe you can follow up with the question, since we see that AI is something big and it's continuing to evolve. What are some of the challenges that you have faced while working with AI data? And can you tell us more about some of the initiatives that you have led that leverage AI and data for global development?
Sure. Yeah, maybe I'll start with giving you a few examples of what we've worked on, and then maybe I can get to the examples. So let me see. I'm supposed to be able to share my screen with you, and can you see this?
Yes.
Okay. So I just put a few slides here with things that we have done over the years, and it goes back to all the way back to 2017. We've been doing for about 10 years. I've set up a team 10 years ago in the UN that did data and analytics, and gradually that team is now also doing AI, and now recently we're mostly doing governance of AI. But I'll get to that. So one of the first things we did in 2017, there were elections in Kenya. So I see there's some of you from Kenya on the line. You may know well that when there's elections, people get really excited. More than excited, there's people die in the violence and the riots that happen. In 2008, I think the numbers here say there were 1,000 dead and 650,000 had to flee their homes, and so this is very, very serious. And what we thought is, can we make a system that predicts when these riots happen, and then maybe the police can patrol the streets, or maybe people can stay inside to avoid being hurt. So we took a lot of content from media, both traditional news media and also social media, from previous elections in 2008 and 2013. And we also had a database from the UN about security incidents, a very detailed one that really pinpointed at this hour there was a riot in this location and this. So sorry, I'm saying a database from the UN. It's actually not a UN database. It's public. It's called ACLED, ACLED. So it's a very useful database if you ever want to do any data science with that relates to security incidents or violence or wars. They have a lot of good information. So we had that information, and then we created this model. So we said, what is the volume of content that is coming out? How many articles or tweets or posts are we finding per minute? What is the content? What are the topics of these that people talk about? What is the sentiment? Are they talking positively or negatively? Are there particular people that speak up, influencers, and look at all these factors and see how they correlate with the violence? And we created a model out of all these factors. And then we ran that model live when the elections happened in 2017, which were, thankfully, they were relatively calm. And our model did pretty well. So I don't know if that is just luck or coincidence, or whether we really hit on a good model to predict violence. But for us, it was more of a demonstration within the UN, because for the UN at that time, these things were also quite new. And to wake up people to the possibility of creating these kind of models and doing some predictive, some predictions on what's going to happen. The next one is more of a statistical study. We used, again, the similar database with conflicts, about longer term conflicts in countries that have been in war for a couple of years or civil war. And then we took all kinds of indicators, economic indicators, and not just GDP and trade, but also things like school enrollment and gender parity in school and these kind of things, because those are things that might be affected by war. And they're going to hit you 10 years later. If you have a long lasting war and a whole generation of kids doesn't get proper education, then 10, 15 years later, you're in trouble in terms of your economy or your political stability. So we looked at all of these things and we tried to find some kind of correlations, and even we even made a mock calculator that you see on the bottom left, where we can say, in terms of Cambodia, if it goes into a conflict that costs them about $14 million a day in just in GDP and trade, and then you can have other things that have an effect as well. And this calculator is not very exact. We make a lot of assumptions, but I think the principle is clear, that our peace building office can help in political negotiations. If Cambodia says we're annoyed with our neighbor, we're going to go to war, and then we can say, well, yeah, totally justified, Cambodia, and you can do that, but do you realize it's going to cost you $40 million a day? And hopefully that will help people, convince people to look at other options, such as political resolution of issues. This is another example of data analytics, heavily using natural language processing, NLP. So what we wanted to do was, we have these SDGs, and hopefully you know about those, the Sustainable Development Goals. And they're goals that look at all kinds of topics like education, poverty, gender equality, our oceans, health, all of these topics. And the tricky part is that all of these topics relate to one another. There's links to it. So we have a group that looks particularly at oceans, and a group that looks at climate, and a group that looks at poverty. But if you want to get people out of poverty, education is actually a good idea. And if you do education in a proper way, in a fair way, then you're educating both men and women, and you're contributing to gender equality. So just with that sort of 30-second idea, I've already touched on 3 different SDGs here. And it's clear that they're all interacting, but how? And that's what we wanted to find out. So the countries around the world, so many of them, they submit these reports, national voluntary reviews of their SDG implementation, what they are doing. And we've looked at those. We've also looked at a lot of academic papers that think about these topics. And we've just, with natural language processing, we tried to catch out of there sentences that had something to do with gender, or with education, or with climate change, and then looking at these paragraphs, seeing how they link these topics, and whether it is a positive linkage or whether it is a negative linkage. So maybe if you talk about industry, what you can see here, number 8, SDG number 8 says that we should have thriving industries. But if you don't do the industries in the right way, they may actually cause a lot of pollution, either in the ocean, or they may lead to climate change. So that's sort of a negative relationship. So we try to identify all of those automatically, and people can see how their projects hit different targets and be sort of more synergistic and avoid the negative repercussions. I'm going to skip these because it's quite similar. This is something we did at the time long ago. It's not that relevant anymore, but actually, you asked me before about the recent developments, and creating summaries is something that a lot of these large language models can do out of the box these days. So at this time, we built this from scratch, but you don't need to do that anymore. And I think that's sort of interesting to see that a lot of things can now be done just by customizing existing models. So there's a lot of AI that you can do that requires very low code or no code. This is another example, maybe this is the last one because they're all sort of, I think you get the idea. We looked at voting patterns of the General Assembly at the UN, on which topics did they vote and did they vote yes or no. And then we identified a number of clusters and 2 countries that are sort of on their own that vote differently. We can see these clusters over time, and we can see how these clusters work, what the cluster looks like for different topics. So if you take the topic of, which topic is this? Oh, here, there's a number of these there at the bottom. So if you talk about the universal human rights, the one on the right, you see that there's one big group in blue that thinks sort of together. There's this is the Eastern Europe and the East, the Far East, and some others. Green is the Western countries, so they're sort of tiny bit negative on this topic, but close to zero. The blue ones are very positive, and the purple ones, which is the United States and Israel, they're super negative about universal human rights. They don't want people to have, they don't want universal rights to exist. So, looking at these things, the idea of this was that if a certain country wants to propose a resolution for the protection of the Amazon forest, for instance, you can look at these charts and you can see which countries are probably going to be aligned with me on this topic, which countries are in the same cluster with me on this topic, and which are opposed. So if you look all the way on the left, protections of the right of the child, you have an easy time, because if you want to have a resolution before that, most people are going to agree with you. So you don't need to have 15 coffees with other ambassadors to try and convince them, etc. The only country is against it is the United States. But most likely your resolution is gonna succeed. But for other things, you might want to convince some other ambassadors. So that's what this what you can do with this, the outputs of this. More things about public opinion on drug policies. I think what's interesting about this is that we use mostly social media here. So we're looking at what are the opinions of people about their own country's management of illicit drugs. And it's very interesting that you can identify sort of 3 groups that think similarly, and they're typically the groups that either produce the illicit drugs. They have one certain opinion. The ones that are intermediate station where drugs get transported through, and then the ultimate destination where most of the drugs get consumed. And the opinions are very similar in those 3 types of countries. So again, this can then be used for policy making and for strategizing on how can we make progress on this issue. So let me stop sharing. How do I stop sharing? I'll share. Okay. Mm,
Can you see like a point
oh,
on
stop
the
share. Yeah,
screen?
I
Yeah.
found the button. Stop share.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Very good.
great.
So those are some examples of what we do with data and analytics and AI these days. Now the challenges, I think, there's a couple of things that I'm personally worried about when it comes to AI. There's a lot of we're doing all these things very quickly, and I think sometimes we don't think enough about what is what are the results of it, the effects of it. So the whole field is moving so rapidly, and people talk about bias and about unfairness that comes into these models. I think the basis of all of these kind of ethical problems with data science and AI is the fact that the world is just moving so quickly. And there's new tools that we can use and they're useful, so we're going to adopt them. But what does it come with? The other challenges that I've seen is data inequity. There's a huge difference when you want to work with data. If you look at countries around the world, I live in New York City, in the US, and there's a lot of data about everything here. But if you go to other countries, if I want to do a similar analysis for Calcutta in India, probably it's going to be much harder because the data isn't there. And there's data inequity also in terms of who has access to the data. We mentioned social media networks before, and I'm very uncomfortable about the fact that these networks are collecting data from everybody around the world. I think governments should put some regulations in place for that. I think if you take an example in Africa, Facebook probably knows more about all the citizens in Zambia than the Zambian government does. And that's a crazy situation. That is not right. And so, that needs to be resolved somehow. And then when it comes to talent, expertise, there's also a bit of there has been in the past a bit of a brain drain. So there's so much demand for people are good in data science and AI in companies in either Europe or especially Silicon Valley, of course. And they offer huge salaries. So everybody around the world is when they have talent in these areas, they're getting offers from these companies that pay really well. So you have this brain drain going from all the countries with all the talent going to a few companies in the world. And I think that's not good either. I think it's getting better now thanks to COVID. I'm very thankful to COVID. Not really, of course, but one of the positive effects is that the whole world seems to have become much better at remote working. And I can see it in my teams. I used to have a team in New York, and nowadays we don't come in every day anymore. We still work remotely 3 days a week. So there isn't really that much point hiring people in New York, and I've started hiring internationally. So my new teams, they're distributed all around the world, and we work asynchronously, we work remotely, and occasionally we have meetings, but and it works really well. So if that continues, that trend, there would be less need, less brain drain. At least people can keep living where they do, and I think it creates a lot of opportunities for everyone. Sorry, that was a bit of a long answer.
That was really perfect. And thank you for sharing those use cases that the UN has been working on. I think it's really good to see the outcome of AI and not think of it like a black box and just robots running around. So that's really good, and thank you for sharing that. Maybe before I continue with my questions, because some are quite similar to what the audience is asking, I can point to this question from Seth. When you speak about the relationship between the brain and AI, what does that look like for business and public sector?
The relation between the brain and AI. Well, I think the whole idea of artificial intelligence is to some extent that it automates processes that are not trivial, that are it simulates human brains to a certain extent, right? And I think that has created all kinds of automation opportunities for a lot of different industries. And you can look at the finance industry where AI is used in algorithmic trading and doing hedge funds, making so many more calculations than humans can. And in healthcare as well, people have been struggling a lot with how proteins actually look like physically, in 3D. And this DeepMind created this program that does it automatically, an AI that does that. And they released it now, a database of all known proteins in the world. And they released that publicly. And, that accelerates research, of course. And so I think, yeah, in all industries, the level of automation, it's at a totally different level now, the kinds of things that you can automate.
Okay, thank you so much. Seth, I hope your question was answered. And just to add on to that question, so currently I know many businesses have identified data science as they go to be able to use data-driven insights when they are doing different operations. So how can they incorporate, yes, using the data, but still stay competitive since all organizations are like currently using data? How can they stay competitive in the field of data?
Yeah, I think companies they have no choice but to adopt data science and AI. I don't know who it was. I think maybe one of the head of NVIDIA or one of these made a statement last year saying that in 10 years time or 5 years time, there's only going to be two types of companies, ones that incorporate AI and data in their entire business model, and the ones that are bankrupt. So basically you have no choice, you have to. And I think how can they do it? I think it's pretty hard. And it's not because the AI is so hard and the data is so hard, but it's because you have to rethink your processes. And it starts by actually understanding and documenting your current processes. And even in the UN, we see that it's very, very hard. We go to different departments and we say, well, we can use data science to help with this and this. Show me exactly what you do, how you take your decisions, and we can create an automated system that helps you with that. And surprisingly, in a lot of cases, people cannot answer that question. What is it that you exactly do? How do you make your decisions? And they've never thought about it. They know how to do their stuff, and things come up and they somehow deal with it and whatever. But that makes things very difficult if you don't know how your own processes work. You cannot automate if you don't have the rules and standards or objectives clearly defined. So that's something that businesses need to do, and that's what they need to start with, I think. And my recommendation would also be, don't see AI or data only as something that increases efficiency in current processes, but really use it to rethink your entire business model. In many cases, for many companies, it's about changing your business model. That's how powerful the capabilities of AI are.
Wow, that's interesting. And thank you for shedding light on that. So now we'll center it back to the UN, and how do you envision the role of AI and data evolving in the UN in the coming years, and what steps is the UN taking to prepare for this?
Yeah, I think there's practical aspects to it. Like I talked already about, how do we automate processes? How do we reinvent processes? And it takes a long time to work with people. There's human resource aspects to it as well. We're going to need probably 300 new data scientists in the UN. We might occasionally be able to hire a few, but mostly they're not going to give us 300 new positions. So what we need to do is to retrain people within the UN also to have a data science background. So I'm working on, I set up an academy, and we're doing awareness building, education of staff. And then the last part of it is, how do we govern all of that? I already talked a little bit about negative side effects of AI, the bias, the unfairness, lack of agency. So we actually defined a number of principles. You can find them online if you look for UN ethical AI principles, you can find them. And what I'm working on right now is how to implement those principles, because these principles say that you should avoid having discrimination or bias be a result of your AI. But fine, how do I do that? I've got 10,000 lines of code here, or 1 million lines of code. How do I know that I've avoided bias? And we're creating those tools. So we create assessment methodologies where you can follow a certain steps to look at your system and see if it's okay. We also have frameworks for development. So we recommend certain processes on how to develop AI, and certain points within that process where you can do certain checks. So it starts already at the design phase, and at the when you think about which data you're going to use, where are you going to get that data from, and what are you how are you going to manipulate that data? So there's different points where you can do certain checks. So that's what we're I think it's and then again education and awareness on these frameworks as well. People need to know how to use these frameworks, how to do a self-assessment of their system. And it's both for development of systems and also procurement, because a lot of what we procure has some aspects of AI in it these days. You cannot do without it anymore.
Yes, I have a follow-up question on that. So as you have mentioned, you are sensitizing maybe people already working in the UN about adding a skill such as data knowledge or just data science in their skill set. Do you feel like this is something that everyone across the world is going to need as a standard skill set? And how does it look for people who don't adopt it? Does it mean they won't have like opportunities in the long run, or they'll be like what we call AI coming to like take away people's jobs if they don't like adapt the data skills? How does that look like?
Yeah, I had recently had a long conversation about that with a group of young people. We did a survey of people between 10 and 20 years old early last year. And then we had a number of workshops where we invited these people together with industry representatives, some people from Google, from NVIDIA, and then together we discussed about the future of AI and robots, and do they take all the jobs away? And I was surprised that these young kids from all over the world, they were very rational about it. They said, okay, well, AI and robots are here to stay, right? So we're going to have to live with them. What can we do to prepare ourselves? And they were really, one of the things they said is, even if you don't plan to use it, understand really well how it works. and then you can see how it can complement your work. So I'm not saying that AI and data is going to take over all jobs, but there's probably going to be touching points with each of these jobs. So I think in the future, it's a matter of the best skill you can have is the ability to collaborate with AI and with robots and with data-driven systems. And I think understanding how they work is definitely going to be very useful in that respect.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So I'll just ask one last question before we go to the audience questions. I see there's one that is similar to the one that I'm asking. So it's more on what are some of the general public, what are some of the ways that the general public can stay informed about latest advancements in AI and data? Maybe you can share with us some resources that you use to stay informed with what is happening in the AI field.
Yeah, I'm not, you know, I'm very deep into this stuff, so I'm not very that good at seeing what is digestible for the bigger public. But I think most news publications, they have some things from time to time, at least once a week in major newspapers, you see something about AI and data. Yeah, read those things. But then I think if you want to go a little bit further, there's lots of very good courses that are available for free on different platforms, and there's one on Coursera called AI for Everyone, I think it's called, and there's you know, a lot of resources to learn a bit more, and most of it is free. And then of course, if you want to go even further, take some of these resources or books and use some of these open source ecosystems, Python or something, to try out some things for yourself. A lot of it is now has gotten to the stage where you can do it out of the box, where it's no code or low code systems to do that. But I think it's very useful for your understanding to do some of these things yourself. So to take a little data set and to try and create a machine learning algorithm, or to create just even a data science experiment, some correlation, try to create a model that is predictive. And I think that that is a very good way of learning.
So thank you so much, Lambert, for sharing that. And yes, please go and also look into the one he has mentioned for AI for Everyone. I thought it was a really good course, mostly even for businesses. So thank you so much. So we'll jump into the chat section. And so some of the questions, I think we can answer like the last bit. But maybe we'll take a question from Bridget. How is the UN dealing with unavailability of certain data, like the data you mentioned? You might not be able to access data from India or some different parts of remote countries to work on. So,
yeah, I think in two ways. First of all, we like to encourage all of our member states to become better at data collection, because a lot of data is available and is collected, but it's just thrown away. It's not systematically captured. So that is something we do. We're actually starting a project this year in Namibia, and one of the things we look at, we're looking particularly at cities and environment, at informal settlements in cities, the slum areas, and we're trying to organize the data around that. So one of the things that we do to progress that cause, to be able to deal better with these issues, is to set up a data portal. I think that's one of the things you can do. The other thing is that a lot of data you can get these days through through secondary means. So you may not have data about where everybody lives or where everybody moves to, or where they work, or what movement patterns. But there's a lot of things that you can do with satellite imagery. We did a project for Itaquini, where we used satellite imagery to look at all the houses in informal settlements and estimate how many people would be living in that house and come up with very detailed population distribution data from that. So that's one way that you can indirectly manage it without having to do a census and go by every house to ask them. Cell phone data has been used quite a lot for looking at different movement patterns. Even in I remember, I think it was in one of the countries in West Africa, where there were bandits going around, armed groups going around, and everybody had fled their villages and they went to the bush. And we at the UN, we wanted to know where everybody is, and so that we can bring food aid or medical vaccinations or these things. And we had no way of accessing the people anymore. They were all in the bush and were hiding from these armed groups. And we used cell phone data to see where all the cell phones were popping up. And you could see they were distributed all in the forest. And then in the morning, all these little dots, they were all coming to one place. And then in the afternoon, they were going back and spreading out again, more slowly this time. And of course, that was a place where people could get water. So all the women were walking towards that place in the morning, and then in the afternoon, walking back a little bit more slowly with the buckets of water. So that was a place where we could contact people and provide medical assistance or whatever. So that's just one example. Now I forgot the question that you asked. Did I answer the question?
I hope yes. From my end, I saw it as a very sufficient answer. Maybe Bridget can comment down. Yes, but it was more on how on the unavailability of data and how you.
Oh, right. Yeah. So yeah, secondary means.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I have this question that has been trending a lot. So Seth says he has been playing around with online tools like ChatGPT and MyJourney, and there was a lot of pushback from copyright developers and artists whose careers have been affected by these trending tools. So how can we be more mindful and ethical when developing these AI solutions? And just a fun fact about this session also, I wanted to incorporate some AI throughout the session, and I also generated questions for this talk from ChatGPT and modified them. So I think the question is very relatable at this point, and we want to know how can we be more mindful and ethical when developing AI solutions so that we don't impact these different careers.
Yeah, I think I sort of mentioned this before, that things are moving so quickly that we lose the ability to look at it. If I think of my grandparents' generation, in their lifetime, they had maybe 4 major technological shifts. At some point, electricity came to the village, and it was good because then they could have light in the evening and read a book. And then at some point, I think they had automobiles, and then they had telephone. And first, the doctor was the only one with a telephone, but nobody could call him because he was the only one. But then later, other people had telephones, and so But the point being that they had about 15 to 20 years to wrap their heads around this new innovation and see how to deal with it in society. These days, we have about 15 minutes, I think, to wrap our head around before the next thing comes. So with something like ChatGPT, I think it's very exciting that we're showing the capabilities of these large-scale language models. And I think at the moment people are being a bit too excited about the things that it does, and there's all kinds of concerns. Here in New York State, I read yesterday, they have forbidden the use of ChatGPT in schools. I don't know how that's gonna work, but they blocked the website and they don't want people to use it because it turns out ChatGPT can do 80% of the homework of these kids pretty much perfectly, and teachers don't know what to do anymore. So that's something. And then of course when you talk about, for example, these images, even creating art. That is all based on learning that they've done from looking at other artists' work. And that's an whole other discussion that we can do. If I go to a museum, I might see some artists from the 1920s that were influenced by artists 20 years earlier. So somebody invented Impressionism or Cubism, and then a lot of others started doing it. And, you see strong similarity to that kind of work. So yeah, they were also copying each other in a sense. So is it okay what GPT does, to create? I can actually tell GPT, make an art piece that looks like it might have been made by this artist, and create new. That probably goes a little bit too far. But I think these are things that we have to grapple with as society to find our comfort zones. And that will take a long time. And unfortunately, developments are moving very, very quickly. So it's a challenge.
Oh, yes, thank you so much for sharing a light on that. Yes, I know it will be a huge challenge, and it's already causing a lot of challenges, as you mentioned, in university. But I also read another article that there's, I think, a student from Princeton or something who created like an AI tool that can be able to decipher if your work was generated by an AI. So that's another cool invention. You create something bad, someone else creates a counter, and life moves on. But thank you so much for that. Tell us, I have like 2 more questions to ask, and this is revolving around our audience, and I know most of them are curious. We want to get into UN. It's doing amazing things. So what resources and opportunities would you recommend for them to explore?
Okay. Yeah, I think if you talk about the UN specifically, we have a lot of different kinds of positions. So you have the traditional career positions for which you need to have quite a bit of job experience, even to enter at the lowest levels. You need to have at least 3-4 years work experience after a degree. You need a degree as well. But there's many other, and increasingly, in my team, I work mostly with contractual positions where it is much easier to come in, and also with less experience. The project that I mentioned in Namibia, probably later this year, we're going to need people locally in Namibia to work on that project. So there's going to be opportunities. And how do you know about these things? I would say follow people on LinkedIn. I think, if you send friends connect invitation, people often ignore it because they get so many of those, and I get dozens of those every day, and most of them are salespeople, or so people usually reject those. But follow, you can always do. You don't need someone's permission to follow them. And there's a number of people that post these opportunities quite frequently. There's a colleague of mine called Gagan, Gagan Vaseer, Vaseer, Gagan Vaseer, and he often, if you follow him, then he often posts opportunities for young people, entry-level opportunities in the UN. Nick Martin is another person who often posts data science opportunities. So look around and find some people. If you look for jobs, whatever jobs in the UN, or jobs in the finance section, or then you find some people who post those, and then follow these people, because they might regularly be posting updates. I think there's also, in the case of the UN, there's a human resource account that posts these things. So find those and follow them. I'll put the name in the chat. So those. Yeah.
Okay.
What other advice can I give you? You know, practice a lot and volunteer a lot, because by doing a job, even if it is a short-term job, even if it is maybe not your ideal job, or if it doesn't pay very well, it doesn't matter, because you develop two things: experience, which you can also put on your CV, and networks. And at some point, people are gonna remember you, especially if you do a good job, if you're professional, if you're reliable, you're true to your word, you deliver what you said. People are gonna remember, and at some point, people are gonna approach you and say, "Oh, you did a good job on this and this. Are you interested in this new job?" So you know, don't aim for the perfect job when you first start, but just take on anything. There's a few networks, I think, people that I have come across, especially in Africa, that employ Africans to help with data science projects on a short-term basis, it's almost like a temp agency or something. I don't recall the name now. I can look it up and send it to you later. But there's a number of these as well. And yeah, use all of those opportunities to gain experience.
Awesome. You have answered my last question that I had for you. Before maybe we close it, I want to see if there's any pending question that we might have missed from our audience and we didn't tackle it. So yeah, I can see there's a bit of a debate about GPT and the schooling system. So hopefully we'll have another debating session and see people's thoughts on that. So I'm not sure more about this question, but maybe it can wrap up our session. It's from Badisa. Are there any initiatives geared towards improving the quality of data in LMICs? And has there been any efforts to assess how replicable are the projects you mentioned at different country levels? Trying out election conflict prediction at country X or country Z. I don't know if that question has been understood. I'll just copy and paste it.
Yeah, it's a good question. I would like to say yes. I mean, what my team has done over the years is really to try to be a catalyst within the UN and also with our member states by doing all these projects as examples. And we don't intend to run those and replicate them in 20 countries. But what we want to do is inspire other people to do something similar in their countries. And I like to think that's being successful in terms of getting people excited about these things. Whether that exact tool that we created has been replicated, I don't know about that. It's often things move so quickly. So what was possible 5 years ago, is irrelevant right now, or a lot more is possible. So these things evolve over time. So it's what is more important for me is to inspire people and to act as a catalyst.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I hope that your question has been answered. And from that, we have been able to wrap up this session, and we want to thank you so much, Lambert, for joining us. I hope you'll be able to come in for other sessions, and even we can do some technical sessions so that we show our audience how best you can use data science and also be ethical about it. But thank you so much for coming in and for sharing your knowledge, and we definitely appreciate it and don't take it for granted. Maybe any parting shots from you before we drop off?
It was a pleasure to spend an hour with you guys. So thanks for inviting me, and I'm really excited to see all the people online here. There's 48 participants right now, and if I think about these people, 48 people being data scientists or AI scientists in the coming couple of years, that makes me very excited. So keep going, keep at it, and you'll be successful. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lambert. So I think we are almost wrapping up. I'll just finish the last bit of my presentation. So thank you so much, Lambert. It was really amazing having you come in. So we have already covered the Q&A session. So I would like to welcome everyone into the Zindi community by requesting if you're able to come volunteer and be part of our ambassador program for the spring cohort. So our application process is you submit your application form. We review the document, we select, and we onboard you. And then after that, you perform a first event, and then we recognize you as an ambassador, and we continue growing with you and your community to help get people on board with what data science is, and also give them the skills, knowledge and skills to proceed as data scientists into the world, and just have those skills in mind. As you can see, it's very important, and we have a lot of benefits for ambassadors. That is, we fund you for your events, we offer swag, and we also give you one free competition to host for your community. We offer support in events. When you're doing events for your community, we give you a database of speakers to invite for your event, and documents that will help you to do an end-to-end event successfully. And also we have an amazing branding team that helps you create posters, and we provide you with all the tools and materials you need for launching an event for your community. So we are here to support you and help build a generation of data scientists in Africa who can be able to solve problems and put Africa on the map. And if you're interested, please scan this barcode, and we can be able to reach out. You can be able to sign up, and we'll be able to orient you into our program. And I will also be sharing a feedback form at the end of the session via email, so that you can tell us maybe what you want to learn more, and because you want us to bring more, so that you can grow your skills and be knowledgeable about what's happening in AI. And as you have seen, we've had an amazing session with Lambert, and we want to continue doing that in 2023 and building a huge data science community in Africa. So thank you everyone for joining, and we appreciate you for coming for this event. And I would like to wish you an amazing weekend ahead. And yeah, looking forward to seeing you in the next session. So bye everyone, can drop off and can say bye as you drop off. Thank you.